Hi, welcome to our tutorial on ancient Rome. Um, please have your study guide open, either on paper or pulled up next to you as we go through this, or take down some notes. Remember, if you're going to come to an actual tutoring session, you need to have at least some of your questions filled out. So if you have any clarification you need from me while you're in tutoring, that we can go over them. Okay, so I have all of our session numbers already plugged in for us, so you can figure out where we covered this information. And there's a lot. So, oh, here comes Maxie to say hello. So number one, what benefits did Rome's location provide the city and its inhabitants? So Rome is on the Italian peninsula. They're the Appian Mountains that run down the peninsula down the boot, almost like a backbone. And then the Alps, which kind of arch over them and separate them from the rest of Europe. And they're surrounded on three sides by the Mediterranean Sea. So Rome had a great location, a good location. There were hills and mountains throughout the Italian peninsula. These hills and mountains helped protect Rome. How did Rome's geography help it to prosper? Well, Rome's place on the Italian peninsula and closeness to the Tiber River helped Romans reach trade routes in the Mediterranean Sea. And again, if you think about Rome sort of being like if Greece and Mesopotamia married each other, their baby would be Italy, because you had mountains and a major river like the Tiber, but you also had rocky soil and limited amount of farmland, like we saw in Greece. So Rome's place on the Italian peninsula and closeness to the Tiber River helped the Romans reach trade routes in the Mediterranean Sea. Trade was an important part of life in ancient Rome. Rome developed several trade routes throughout the Mediterranean Sea. This helped Rome trade with other civilizations nearby. Later, the Roman armies used these same routes to conquer large amounts of land to extend the empire along the Mediterranean. The Roman Empire's geography influenced its growth. Rome's location allowed for successful agriculture, which allowed the city to grow. It also helped the Romans get trade routes. Because of these trade routes, the city could meet the demands of its growing population. Rome's location helped it protect it from outside forces. At the same time, it offered a route to the sea, allowing travel and conquest. Because of ancient Rome's location, a collection of small towns grew into a major city and became a powerful empire. Number 3. How are the governments of the Roman Republic and Roman Empire different? Excuse me. The Roman Republic was a government in which people elected their leaders. Roman citizens had certain rights and responsibilities. Patricians had most of the power at first. So patrician is the word for a noble, or an aristocrat in Rome. However, over time, plebeians fought for and won a major role in the government. So plebeians are your working class citizens, or the proletariat, as we went over in Greece. Rome's government was made up of 3 parts. Each had the ability to limit the power of the other parts. Separation of powers, like we see in our modern United States government. Romans created a written code of laws to be sure that people were treated fairly. It's almost like their version of the Constitution called the 12 Tables. Okay, skipping forward. What was the main purpose of dividing the empire into half? So, as we've seen before, what happens when an empire gets too large is that they cannot control it. So, Diocletian, Emperor Diocletian realized the empire was too big for one man to rule. He named a co-emperor, Maximin, to rule under him. Both men took the title of Augustus. Diocletian would rule the Eastern Roman Empire, which is where Italy is located, and Maximin would rule the Western Roman Empire, which is where the Byzantine Empire would develop after the fall of Rome. Each ruler named a Caesar to rule some of the provinces in his half of the empire. This man would become Augustus when the ruler who named him Caesar died. Number 5. How did the rights of the plebeians differ from the patricians? Again, as I mentioned, plebeians are your working class people and patricians are your nobility. 3 close social classes made up Roman society. These classes were the patricians, the plebeians, and the slaves. The patricians were priests, government officials, and wealthy landowners. They were considered the upper class. The plebeians were common people such as craftsmen, laborers, and farmers. Slaves were usually people who were captured in war. They did not have any role in government. The plebeians could vote in the early Roman Republic, but only the patricians could hold office. The plebeians resented this, so in 494 BCE, they threatened to create a new city with its own government. The action forced the patricians to agree to change Rome's government. Over the course of about 200 years, the plebeians fought and won the right to take part in many aspects of the government. The plebeians' political fight for equal rights in the government was called the conflict of the orders. Number 6, going back to session 57, what was the impact of Rome's extensive road network? So Romans built thousands of miles of roads and bridges. Actually, some of them still exist. Soldiers, messengers, and traders throughout the empire used them. Romans had such advanced building skills that some of the roads still exist today. So let me just go back and just clarify that too. So the impact was that they were able to increase trade and conquer on these roads. Number 7, what did the Romans give to those they conquered, and how did it impact the government? Sorry, typo. So the Pax Romana brought an end to the inside fighting that had existed in Rome since the time of Caesar. During this period, Rome's growth brought great riches and new ways of doing things to the empire and its people. Many people were happy to become part of Rome. So as they spread the empire, people would actually take on the culture of the Romans. Many people were happy to become part of Rome. The Romans brought many advantages, including better architecture, education, and health. A common language, which is Latin, the calendar, religion, and form of money helped tie the Roman Empire together. So unlike other conquered peoples that we've seen in other areas of history, people were actually quite happy to become Roman. Number 8, how did the advanced Roman engineering of aqueducts reflect the geographic human-environment interaction? So an aqueduct, if you recall, is like a big bridge with arches that carries water from the river into the city. Rome created order over a large area with many different peoples and languages. Romans did this by developing roads, aqueducts, a common form of money, a code of law, and by introducing practical reforms. All of this allowed the spread of Rome's cultural achievements. Roman engineers and architects developed styles and ways of doing things that were their own. Public baths spread throughout the empire. Many Roman buildings and roads throughout the empire still exist today because of the invention of concrete. And these aqueducts were made out of concrete. Rome used Greek style building styles, however, they built larger, taller, and heavier buildings than the Greeks built. Romans did this by adding their own ideas such as vaults, arches, and the use of concrete. Okay, so to go back to the question, an aqueduct brings water from the river into the city. So human-environment interaction. What do people do to the environment? What does the environment do for the people? Okay? Does that make sense? It helped bring water from the river into the city. Number 9, why is the United States both a democracy and a republic? So the United States is a democratic republic. We have elements of both types of government. A democracy means that we vote for things, okay? But we don't directly vote unless it's a very small town government like town hall. We vote for representatives who make those decisions for us, and that was what makes us a republic. So a democratic republic is a form of government operating on principles adopted from a republic, like in Rome, and a democracy, like in Greece. Rather than being a cross between two entirely separate systems, democratic republics may function on principles shared by both republics and democracies. That's us, folks. Okay? So we vote for our 3 branches of government who make the laws, carry out the laws, and interpret the laws. Number 10. Why did Christianity spread throughout the Roman Empire? So Constantine, on his deathbed, actually converted to Christianity, making it the official religion of the Roman Empire after hundreds of years of persecuting Christians. But Christianity is what they call a proselytizing religion, meaning they want new members to join, that you want people to accept Christ. So it wanted its members to join the religion. Over a few hundred years, Christianity would spread across the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire included Italy, Spain, North Africa, and Egypt. At first, Christianity was an enemy of the Roman Empire, and later it became its official religion. So once Constantine becomes Christian, it starts to spread. And that's why you have Christianity and the Catholic faith being such a stronghold in Europe today. Number 11. Okay, Julius Caesar. We did our obituaries on Julius Caesar. And you did your classroom about this whole lesson. So, remember, he was in the triumvirate. Pompey becomes his enemy, as Caesar's off in Gaul as governor. Pompey knew important people in Rome. He saw Caesar as a threat. They convinced the Senate to order Caesar to give up command of his army. He was to return to Rome alone, but he did not do that. Caesar agreed only in the condition that Pompey would also give up command of his army. The Senate refused Caesar's appeal, and so he ignored their order. In 49 BCE, Caesar led his army across the Rubicon River into Italy to fight Pompey and his army, essentially invading his own country. The Senate saw Caesar's move as an act of war. Many historians see Caesar's crossing the Rubicon as the end of the Roman Republic. The expression crossing the Rubicon is still used today, meaning reaching a point of no return. Caesar chased Pompey's army through Greece and Spain, where Caesar defeated them. He then crossed the Adriatic Sea to face Pompey himself at Pharsalus in 48 BCE. At last, Caesar won, and Pompey fled to Egypt, where he was killed in September of that year. The rise of Caesar made some members of the Roman Senate fear he was gaining too much power. They wanted Rome to remain a republic. They thought that Caesar was trying to establish himself as a monarch or king, actually a dictator. If that happened, each leader would pass the crown to someone in his family instead of being elected. This would mean the crown would stay in a single family line, creating a dynasty. The senators would lose too much of their power if this happened. Number 12. Why were Caesar's reforms politically strategic and beneficial? With Pompey out of the way, Caesar traveled to Egypt to claim it for Rome. At the time, Cleopatra ruled Egypt. Cleopatra was the last ruler of the Macedonian dynasty or family line of rule. Ptolemy had established the line. Ptolemy was a general under Alexander the Great and became the ruler of Egypt after Alexander died. Caesar's victory over Egypt further extended Rome's territory and increased Caesar's reputation. After the success in Egypt, Caesar returned to Rome in victory. He was a great hero of the people. This made him very popular. Caesar was declared dictator for life instead of the usual term of 6 months. Terms usually were limited because the dictators were given complete power over the government. Caesar named himself the Imperator, the Roman word for emperor. This made many senators uneasy, but it made the people very happy. Number 13. How did the years of the Pax Romana impact the people around? Remember, Pax in Latin is peace, Romana, Rome, so years of peace and prosperity. Many of the struggles within Rome ended during the Pax Romana after Caesar's death. Rome continued its conquest of other cities and civilizations. Rome's position near the Mediterranean Sea was an important part of the growth of its empire. It gave Rome a mild climate and a long growing season. As a result, the farmers were able to grow enough food to supply their armies. The sea also gave Romans easy trade routes for travel, trade, and conquest. And let me just add to that, too, that during the time of the Pax Romana, you have two things going on. You have a lot of people within the Roman Empire becoming very wealthy. But as the emperors are conquering new land, they're bringing more and more slaves into Rome. And that ends up having a negative impact on the working class, the plebeians, as you're going to see this as we examine the reasons for the fall of Rome. So just keep that idea in mind. Number 14. How did the Romans expand the Greek concept of democracy? Rome's government was somewhat like the democratic government of ancient Athens. Roman government had democratic elements similar to Athens' Council of 500 and its assembly, where all citizens could have a say. There were, however, some key differences. One of these differences is that Athens was a direct democracy and all citizens could vote. However, Rome was a representative government like us. In a representative government, people elect leaders to govern and represent the views of the entire society. In ancient Rome, unlike Athens, not everyone's views were represented. On the other hand, the notion of elected officials serving the interests of the entire society was an important new idea in political thought. Another democratic principle of the Roman government was a written code of laws. Early on, laws were not written down. Only the patricians who made the laws knew what they were. The plebeians objected to this, feeling they would not be treated fairly unless the laws were written down. They protested and finally forced the patricians to agree to a set of written laws. In 451 and 450 BCE, Rome's first written laws were written on 12 bronze tablets or tables. These laws, which became known as the Law of the 12 Tables, were posted in the Roman Forum for everyone to see. Written law remains important throughout the world. Which of the following is an external reason for the fall of Rome? Okay, you're going to do a DBQ on this. There's lots of external reasons. The Germanic tribes attacking Rome several times. This is the Visigoths. Alaric the Goth was the first Germanic king to sack Rome in 410. The Huns, under their leader